Huh, great. Yeah, her parents were my neighbors up until a little while ago.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Good. Well, shall we launch in? I guess I'm the interim chair. Is that correct, Terry?
Yes.
Okay. Well, we will call the meeting of January 22nd to order at 5:30 for the Shelburne Select Board. Before we begin, I just wanted to express all of our sorrow about Bob Manner's recent death and just take a moment to remember him and his many accomplishments. I just wanted to say a few words about that, just for those who may be out there. And just that Bob was a true servant of Shelburne for his whole life. And there are many others who can speak far more eloquently than I can about his work in emergency services, but the part of Bob's life and career that I intersected with is his service on the Select Board. And he was a very long-serving Select Board member and very dedicated. And I would be remiss if I did not say that Bob and I did not always agree on everything. And we had our disagreements, but what I found in my 9 years of serving with Bob, and I think he served for 17, is that there were far more areas where we did agree and where Bob often persuaded me of the better path through his knowledge and experience, particularly on the highway department, where he really brought a lot of expertise and in terms of his interest in local history, we will miss that. We will probably have to wait a long time to find someone with his interest and knowledge in town roads. So our town road study will probably not be completed for some time without Bob's help. But so I just wanted to say that I really appreciated his dedication and we'll miss him. Rick.
No question. Everything you said is 100% right on. And I'm wondering if we could just take a moment of silent reflection in his honor before we begin.
Definitely. Thank you, Rick. Terry, any thoughts or words from you?
It was just a pleasure working with him. He was elected, I went back and looked today, in 2004. So it would have been 20 years.
Almost
that he
20 years.
served.
Okay, I didn't have the dates right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Uh,
Well, he certainly.
he became quite a leader. You know, in the beginning, he was a little bit wild, but he became a great leader. And I love the way he ran the meetings.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not going to be the same.
Yeah. So launching in, I think Bob and John Payne before him were remarkable and notable for really going out in the saddle, you know, and both of them really served right to the end. And I think that was just a real mark of their dedication to our town. So accepting of the meeting minutes of January 8th. Rick, do you have any notes or comments?
I have read them and found no errors, and I am good with them as is.
Okay, I just have one question, Terry. I noticed in the section where it talks about the cowl gym and the little grates that go over the heating registers,
Mhm.
that Rick made a motion that it looks like we never voted on. And I'm just curious how that turned out in either of your memories.
Huh, I missed that.
Oh, I'm sure I can go back through my notes, but it was voted.
We
Yeah.
did vote on that.
Yes.
Okay,
I'll make an
so
asterisk to go back and correct that.
great, thank
Good.
you.
Good catch. I missed that part.
Okay. No, I just wanted to make sure we were moving ahead on that project.
It's done.
It's done,
Yeah.
good. Well,
Yeah.
that's really moving ahead then. Good. Well, if there's no other changes, then is there a motion to accept as amended?
I so move.
I'll second, and all in favor, Rick?
Aye.
Andrew is aye, and the motion carries. And we have department liaison reports. And I guess before we start in on that, since we will not have Bob's report on highway, I was going to volunteer to step in for Bob on the highway and the FERCog. Is that what he was carrying this year?
He was carrying highway, senior center, the FERCog, and the FRTA, and you were an alternate to both the FRTA and the FERCog.
Oh, I thought I was the primary on the FRTA because I've been attending their meetings.
Oh, okay.
So I'm pretty sure I was, but in any case, I will
Okay.
continue on the FRTA. And I'm happy to jump in on all three of those if needed. I don't know. How are you feeling, Rick? Do you have did you want to pick up the senior center, or do you want me to do that?
I'm doing 3 already, and that's a regular.
Oh, why don't I do the senior center then? Because I actually didn't do any regular ones except for the Pratt Library this year, since I was doing mostly projects.
And you have a full plate. If you would like, I'd be happy to do the town. It's just up the town yard. It's just up the street from me. I know the players. I'd be happy to do
Yeah.
that.
No, I'd be happy to. I can do the highway and the senior center. That's fine.
Okay.
You have the police and the town hall, so
And the veterans.
and the veterans, yeah. So if that works for everybody, I'll pick those up until we have a new select board member to share the fun. So Rick, do you have updates?
I have 2 tonight. One from the town hall, the assessor's office reached out to me about the possibility of considering hiring a consultant for reevaluation of the town's half of the 3 dams. Currently, the valuations of those are ancient, and we may be leaving a significant amount of tax money on the table. But there is I think I'm right, a full town evaluation coming in 2025. And the discussion is very preliminary, just first subject broached, to possibly consider looking more closely at those. It would be, of course, a matter of whether the consultant fee would offset very quickly a turnaround, the increased valuation that could be found. So they're doing a little more investigative work to get a better handle on it. But the subject was broached, and I said, find out what you can and bring it to us. So I wanted to mention that. I did attend.
Before you go on, I just wanted to say that I happened upon our assessor's assistant the other day when I was signing the warrant, and she pigeonholed me about the very same subject. And
there you go.
And the one, I thought of 2 things with that. One is that it might be helpful to have her come and sort of lay out the case before we decide how to proceed with that. Or not. I mean, I don't know, Terry, I'll take your recommendation too. It just seemed like the trade-off that she mentioned to me, it seemed like if you were looking at it just from a financial perspective, there's a lot of upside to doing to hiring a sort of professional utilities assessor, which is what she was recommending, and going that way. The big downside that she sort of laid out was that if we do that and we get a higher assessment, we'll definitely earn more tax revenue, but we may also be more likely to trigger an appeal by the utility, and then get into a lengthy back and forth with them. And so that's really, to me, is the question, you know, that we need to come down upon in terms of whether to go forward in that way. I'm kind of inclined to take my chances and hire the professional, just because I think having a utility grade assessor and having a recent reval where, you know, a lot of the dams in the area will have been recently revalued, I think would give us a strong position if they do decide to appeal. But that's just my thought on it. So I don't know if anyway.
There's a cost to the appeal too. So
Yeah.
I think they've got a lot to figure out before they actually bring it to us. So I just wanted to mention it, and I'm glad she actually cornered you on it as well.
Yeah.
The other report I have is from the Veterans Center, and as I had said previously, they did finalize the next fiscal budget. Interestingly, they have doubled in claims in the last 12 months for the year. The entire year was double the previous year, which is very interesting. What I had no clue was currently it's $2 million a month in veterans benefits that they're managing into our local veteran community, which is just a number I couldn't have guessed.
Is that for Franklin County?
That's for the district.
Ah.
So the district, interestingly, the district has to be re-sanctioned by the state every 3 years. And Chris mentioned, Chris Demers, by the way, Terry, that a memo is required to be signed and was going to be sent to you, if it hasn't already, shortly, to sign on in support of the continuation for the next 3 years of the Veterans District. The dollars and cents, there's a chapter 115 benefit for the Veterans Services District. We are a town with few in that category, and our annual figure will be $4,410. And that's a kitty. It's not a commitment. That's their best guess at the most we could expect to have a rise in the next fiscal year. The annual fiscal budget for fiscal year 2025 for Shelburne will be $5,682. It's up 5-ish%, something in that neighborhood. And it's not a very significant figure compared to the amount of benefit dollars they're putting back into our own veteran community. Those numbers all get sent to the Finance Committee. It's nothing we need to do with them. I just thought they were of interest. And that's all I have.
Thanks. Anything on the police?
No.
Okay. The only thing I have is we did have a meeting of the Pratt Library Committee, and our main sort of project there is reviewing both the building maintenance and building capital needs. And so Lori has made a good spreadsheet of both of those things, which we went over. The two big items on the capital side are the elevator replacement and the large back rear historic curved window replacement that was the one big item that was not completed in the capital campaign that the library finished. So with that, the suggestion we made was to make that a project to put before the Community Preservation Committee next year, and to do it slowly. In other words, there wasn't a feeling of urgency that we need to replace those windows right away, but that we might use the CPA funding to steadily sort of build up a fund that could eventually replace the windows, and maybe, you know, set aside $10,000 a year in CPA funding that can accumulate until we hit the number and can go out to bid for windows. And to give us some time to research all the historical niceties of what the best way is to replace those windows, because there are different ways to do it. The other big item is the elevator, which, sort of like the Memorial Hall elevator, is, you know, fairly old, somewhat creaky, and with parts that are hard to get. And while it is currently operating, it's sort of a unknown crapshoot, like the Cowell boiler and other things, how long it will last. But again, we sort of went around it a fair amount and came out sort of in a similar position of wanting to come to the capital planning meeting when we do that, and propose that we begin setting aside kind of a mini replacement reserve fund for that elevator over however many years the elevator continues to last. But maybe again, asking the voters to put $10,000 a year into that reserve fund, so that we'll be readier when that elevator goes, and won't have to reach as far for the replacement funds. And in the meantime, we can also do more research about the different alternative vehicles that we could put in that shaft. The one that the committee is leaning towards is the least expensive approach, which is a lift similar to the kind that exists in the Ashfield Town Hall. I don't know if you've seen that, Rick. But it's another way to get, just one floor up, if that's all you've got to do. And a less expensive way than a full elevator. And since that elevator doesn't get a huge amount of use, I think going with a low-cost option like that might not be a bad way to go when we need to do that. So that's what the Pratt is ruminating about, and what they'll be bringing to our meeting when we do capital planning and that sort of thing. I think that's all Terry, do you have anything more in the liaison report area?
No, I believe John Walsh is on and would give an update on Carol Jim, if he's available.
Okay.
Hi, I am. As you mentioned earlier, the basketball cages are installed, and I think, in my opinion, they look very good. There appear to be a couple of issues around using of the bleachers in the gymnasium. There is one set of the handicap bleachers that appear to be damaged. I haven't had a chance to really look into it. There was also some discussion, and Rick, you may have been at that meeting where it was briefly mentioned, something about looking into bleachers and issues there. I know that Diana did take a lot of time in the last couple of weeks to actually pull them all out, and has vacuum underneath all of them. And she did a great job with that. Currently,
I think Mary, what's her name, who was a member of the rec committee, wrote us a memo about the broken handicap bleachers, and with a strong plea to have us replace them. So they have done some research about that.
Yeah, so I have not seen that email yet, or if I have, it's kind of got lost in the sauce. I will, when I get back from vacation, we'll try to dig a little bit deeper. There are pieces of it hanging out in the tab room and there's pieces of it hanging out in the office, so I don't really know what the actual issue is. The other bleachers are they're using chains to keep them up in place, and Bill Buck put on master locks. But he also was just ghost locking them, so it appeared as if they're locked. In fact, I got a call the other day that they were locked. So somebody during the cleaning process may have inadvertently locked them, but they should be able to be pulled down. Charlemont Academy uses the gym and they pull down too when they come in. So I don't see, other than that one broken handicap section, the rest of them can be used.
Mhm.
The
Great.
only other thing about the gym is I have been monitoring the heat temperatures in both the basement and up in the gym. I did an experiment and turned off two of the ones in the basement because the basement has been actually running above 60 degrees. And after I turned off two, the temperature only went down to about 58 degrees. So that will save us a little bit. But it seems that people that I've talked to are very happy with the temperatures in the gymnasium itself.
Great. And John, you're reporting to us wearing your interim Cowell director hat,
Correct.
recreation director hat. Yes.
Correct.
Great. And I just wanted to let you know, since we're on that topic, a couple of weeks ago, Diana Hardina ran into me on the street as I was coming out of town hall and whisked me off and gave me an impromptu tour of the basement of the Cowell gym, because she wanted to show me the new back area where the teen center used to be, which is her new ping pong room, which is very cool. There are two ping pong tables there. There's room for a third. But there's also the other thing that she showed me, which is what I'm getting to here of leaving in your hopper, is there's a fair amount of need in that basement for reorganizing of space and maybe building of shelves to more efficiently store a lot of the stuff that various people are storing, including the election equipment. The emergency management committee has a whole bunch of stuff which is kind of in the back there, but in the teen center room, kind of blocking where we'd like to have a third ping pong table. And the frontmost room nearest to the food pantry, I think could be kind of reorganized to more efficiently house stuff, so we could move maybe that emergency stuff up there. But anyway, that's a project I'm sort of putting in your hopper as our new director to look at.
Going to come right back at you to say, it appears that there have been agreements made with other groups to store equipment, and that needs to be clarified as to who has authority to be leaving stuff down there.
Yeah, well, there's the question of authority, but there's also the question of efficient storage of how much space each group needs in order to store
Christmas
things.
tree lights have been in that ping pong room, and that's where they were completely spread out, because they're even if you put shelves up, those are all those long ropes of lights.
Right.
There's not going to be an easy way of doing that, but I agree that we need to look into that storage issue. But there's not a simple solution until we know I know, or have given direction. Looks like Terry has a comment.
Yeah, I had mentioned before when John returns that we're going to have a meeting with all the different groups that have stuff stored down there, include the recreation committee, the select board, and just come up with a better plan.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a need to just know who has permission to put stuff, and also kind of delineating how much space they each have.
I do agree with John that each person that has stuff stored had sought prior approval from the board. That committee needs more room. We need to talk about how do we accomplish both.
Yes, yes. Good. Well, I'm glad that that discussion is on the docket, and we'll come back to it, John, when you get back.
Yep, thank you.
Great. Do you have more for us?
No, that covers what I can think of right now.
Great. All righty. Anything else in the department liaison bucket? No, hearing none, we'll go along. We've got 5 minutes till our 6 o'clock appointment. Terry, I'm gonna go to old business B. That might be 5 minutes. If the Cowell Gym proposed oil tank replacement, it looks like from our packet and notes that John Walsh is recommending the lower cost Maple Hills option. Is that correct, John?
No, I'm not involved in that at all.
Oh, did I
John,
misread
you
that?
and I spoke and I shared the quotes with you.
Oh, yeah.
And you agreed that as long as Maple Row Farm has partnered with a plumber, a licensed plumber, that they would be able to accomplish the work.
Sure, assuming that they have all the qualifications to work with that type of stuff, I think that's fine. But I haven't, I know you sent me what the prices were, but I didn't actually look at their qualification. If I did, I don't remember.
And Terry, in terms of those qualifications, do those include, carrying enough liability coverage or other kinds of licensing, or what is it we need to make them a legit contractor for the
I
town?
did send each of the proposals to you. Both will provide insurance, but we didn't specify what the insurance limits would be or what would be needed. If you want more information on that, I could certainly get it, because they didn't specify. They just said that they have liability insurance. They'll carry their own policy. Of course, the other bidder, that was higher, they've definitely spelled everything out, what they carry, they're known.
Right. Do you have a recommendation, Terry?
I do.
Okay, you want to go first, Rick?
No, if Terry's gathering.
No,
her
I'm
thoughts.
really on the fence about this.
Okay.
I would feel so much better if the low bid had prior experience.
Mhm.
I don't know about the plumbing. I don't know that just because they partnered with a plumber makes them qualified.
That was my thought exactly. And, Maple Row is the one that did the pole barn, and that worked out fine. But their bid was $4,500. Sandry Energy was $6,250. Same neighborhood. I thought one of the bigger questions was, since there are 2 full tanks and we're proposing to remove both, put in one new, fill it back up, and all the rest of the oil would be delivered to the town yard, I believe. The question was, did Maple Row Farm or Wilmette Plumbing have the ability or the licensing to transport fuel oil? And the response that they sent back, basically, it looked like Maple Row asked Wilmette to send a letter, and they said, yeah, we can handle everything that it needs for this project. They didn't specify anything. I did also, prior to one of the most recent Recreation Committee meetings starting, went down, lost $100 pair of shoes when I stepped into the oil tank area, because the combination of rainwater and the tanks leaking oil, or I guess potentially are leaking, but definitely had a spill, an overfill apparently. The floor is covered in oil, or oil and water mix. It's a mess, but I was in already, and both tanks, all 4 legs are in disastrous looking peril, in my opinion. Where a vertical 2.5-inch pipe is now starting to splay out like this. I think we need to move on this. I think we need to have somebody that knows what they're doing, obviously has transport capacity to pump out, put back in, and take the rest to another location. And I think we ought to act on this and get it moving personally with Sandry for the minor amount of money of difference. That's just my opinion.
If I could, I just want to also, Rick, you mentioned to me that you think it's important that whoever you awarded to put some type of barrier down on the floor.
Yes, I suggested,
Contractors are coming in and out so that that oil and the water is not tracked into the.
Right.
into the-
right, I suggested to Terry that when this happens and the bid is awarded, that she advises the person who's given the job to come prepared with a roll of rosin paper or something so that they aren't tracking that oil in and out 100 times between that room and the outside, but also an absorbent material to spread, because there was at least a 1/4 inch, and that's a big room, just floating with a mixture of water and oil, so that they came prepared. And that's all.
Terry, do you know how old the oil is in those tanks?
Just delivered, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was delivered at the beginning of this heating season.
Oh, okay. The reason I ask is that the other factor in terms of having a professional who knows how to handle oil is that if you have really old sludge in the bottom of your tanks, it can be hard to pump out. And I had that happen to me when I put in mini splits and had the contractor take out my oil tank at the same time. And they wound into a real problem with it. They wound up having to cut the tank in half because they couldn't, it was so sludgy, they couldn't pump it out. And, you know, so I don't know if that is likely to happen with our tanks, if there's a lot of sludge in the bottom, but it's possible, you know, and it means that you've got to have people who are ready for those kind of eventuality or contingencies and stuff, because it can be really messy when you have to cut up your tank and stuff like that, you know.
Heck yeah. And it wouldn't be Sandry's first rodeo, which is why I'm leaning
Yeah,
them.
so
as
I'm kind of with you, Rick, is that I'd like to see this done right and not wind up with a big oily mess, you know.
Then I would make a motion. I'm sorry, John. I'm sorry, Andrew, sorry.
You're
Oh,
muted.
sorry.
You're muted, John.
No, I
Oh,
know,
there you go.
you're just taking it off. My one concern right now is that I don't know what environmental regulations are as far as whether or not this is a large enough spill to require a clean harbor type of a cleanup. And that would be something to ask the contractor. You can't just dispose of spilled oil. And so I think that should also be something that has to be looked into.
Did we have any specifications about that when we went out for these estimates, Terry?
They came and viewed they were in the boiler room to provide the quote.
Oh, so they saw it. It was what Rick is
Yes.
describing was there.
Right.
Yes.
I mean, I think part of the responsibility is the company that came and overfilled the tank, and that should be thought about as to whether or not they should be approached about paying for that cleanup.
I will speak if this award happens within the next few minutes. Tomorrow I will contact the successful proposer and speak to them about all of this.
Well, Terry, it sounds like Rick and I are leaning in the direction of Sandry. Are you in that boat, or you have a different
Yes.
look up? Okay,
Yeah.
well, shall we have a motion then, Rick?
Then I would move that we award the replacement project of the oil tanks at Cowell Gym to Sandry Oil for their bid of $6,250.
I will second that. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Rick?
Aye.
Andrew is aye, and the motion carries. All right. And we are at 6:05, and we're ready to go back to our appointment with Jeff Bettner regarding the Streetlight Committee update. You're on, Jeff.
All right, thank you all. We've been moving along with the Streetlight Committee. We've had a number of meetings now. We're primarily working with Real Term Energy to try and get through their 6 phases of, or 6 tasks, I guess they call it, of project. And task 1 was the streetlight audit, which they've completed, and that's up online. And along with that, our committee has kind of put together some suggestions for what lights we might want to think about deleting, and a few that we need to add that are in the town possibly. So we'll need at some point we should have a meeting with you guys in the select board, and we can go through it item by item or however we want to do it. But we do have quite a list of which could actually, it's important to do just because we foresee that there could be about 15% of the lights that we have in town could really be eliminated just because there are duplications of lights that are very close by, like the next pole over and things like that. So it could actually save potentially 15% of our total costs. It could also, whether we go with Eversource or whether we do this ourselves, it's still going to save money down the road. So it's something to put on the back burner for addressing fairly soon so that we can know how many lights we're actually dealing with. Task 2 is streetlight acquisition, which we really can't do with Real Term Energy at this point. So we've delayed them on that because once we sit down with Eversource and finalize the amount that it'll take to do the streetlight buyback, that triggers a 60-day, we have to go forward with the project. So we really can't do that till after the town has basically voted on whether we're even going to go through with the project. Task 3 is selection of the equipment and manufacturers installers. Real Term just provided us a product evaluation report of 4 different companies that are interested in dealing with Shelburne and our lights. But at this point, our committee is basically trying to look at each of those and figure out what's the lighting that's going to be best for us. So we need to make a decision that kind of falls in our hands. We just received that report on Friday. So we're kind of going through it now and trying to view a lot of the different lights that are being offered for us. There's 4 different companies and 4 different styles of lights. So we're trying to measure apples and apples and apples and oranges and all sorts of different things along the way. So that's kind of one of our next important tasks to figure out which company might be the one that we would want to really throw everything into. That leads us to task 4. Once we've done that, once we've chosen a manufacturer, Real Term then does a photometric design. So they actually take that company's lights and best suit it to our town. But of course, they can't do that until we've decided which company and which type of light we're ready to go with. So that's been kind of back and forth. Task 5 is the smart controls. We have had a workshop on smart controls put on by Real Term. And at this point, we've just kind of kept it in the back burner. We haven't really decided to go with any kind of smart controls yet, but we don't want to totally rule it out because there may be circumstances where smart controls would really save a fair amount of nuisance and other things, and as well as energy. But for the moment, we're kind of going with the simplest method we can put together. And then task 6 is an investment grade audit report, which once we have some of those other things figured out, that'll go forward. But right now, what Real Term has offered to do is to give us by February 2nd, Groundhog's Day. They're going to give us a report. It'll be a simplified audit that will basically say kind of a worst case scenario. Since we haven't picked a manufacturer, they're going to take the more expensive manufacturer, work it through with that, and just give us kind of some rough costs of what would be the worst case scenario if we took the, not necessarily worst case lights, but just the most expensive. And then we can actually tailor that down the road for, but that'll at least give us enough background to go forward with trying to figure out for grants and even just for the town meeting to know what we need to present. So it'll give us a starting base to work on. Let's see, other than that, I think that's our main targets at this point. I'm open to questions from you guys.
Can you just say again what that last one was, Rick? I was preoccupied.
That's the investment grade audit. So that's
got it. Okay, thank you.
And that kind of comes once we have more details, but they're going to speed it up a little bit and give us a kind of a 1 and 2 weeks that will just be a 1-page report that would give us an idea of the funding going forward, so that we have something to work with for planning for budgets and for grants and sort of other things that we try and go after. So yeah, so any other question? Oh, Rick. Yeah.
Go ahead, Rick.
Yeah, this temporary or interim investment grade audit is of concern to me. Like you said, it'll be kind of a worst case scenario and give you a place to throw numbers at, which is not what we were under the impression we had contracted with them for. We approved at the Energy Committee's suggestion $9,100 for them, which is a number that RTE had provided you folks, or the Energy Committee, to do an investment grade audit, so we could go to town meeting and say, here's what it'll cost all in. Here's the comparison side by side. So the absence of a real investment.
Well, it's not going to be an absence. It won't be an absence. It's just we need something to move forward. For us, we've got a lot that we have to plan with on February. So we're really hoping that we can have at least some numbers to work with, but we'll still go forward with a full investment grade audit once we know what company, what type of lights and all those kinds of things. So
with what money, Jeff? At my understanding, I say with what money? My understanding is
with the money that's there already, because they've
already billed 7,800, right?
Correct.
And we have 9,100.
Correct.
And the CEO at our meeting this week said, "Oh, that's not going to cover it."
Yeah, I've talked to him since then, and he actually got back to me today. So we're trying to work that out. Part of the problem came with when they were originally doing the GIS streetlight audit and making the online GIS map for us. The guy who was on their crew called me and asked me, would we want to add the decoratives to the GIS report? And so we talked about it, and I said, well, I can GIS, I can do a GPS for each of those and do it. And he said, well, I'm already out here, why don't I just do it? But he didn't say anything about a cost. And so that's where the missing money comes from. And so I think they're willing to eat some of that. And so we're working with them right now to try and settle that out, because it was my mistake, because I thought I had not read any of the professional services agreement until December. I didn't even see it until later. So I had no idea that was in there as a cost, and it took them minutes to do. So it really did not cost them that much money to do an audit, because all they did was GPS things that I had already GPSed all the other lights for them ahead of time. So we had done a lot of the groundwork. So I think we're just going to negotiate out with them, and I think we'll be back on track. So he said that he would be willing to do the short-term audit, and he's not ruling out doing the full audit either. So I will nail him down on that. But
John?
Yeah, John?
Yeah, so the communication here with our RT, whatever they are, they're way ahead and beyond what the committee was even prepared for. The stuff that they started presenting to us was based on going to a different task, and we still haven't had a kickoff meeting with them. I think the board should take a look at what was signed by Bob back in September, October, because there are a lot more things in that agreement that you have never agreed for us to pursue. And there are termination agreements in there, but certainly is going to be a lot more than $9,000 to continue going through the process with them of putting out bids, reviewing bids. They're proposing that they're going to run the whole thing for us, which I don't disagree is not a bad thing if we get that far. But the committee itself really didn't see the copy of the agreement until 2 weeks ago when one of the volunteer residents who sits in had asked Terry to see it. And so there is some issues, and I brought this up with them the other day, and they're proceeding like we're asking for a full service agreement, and in fact, it's only supposed to be the investment grade audit. So the tasks, and knowing that Bob was not well, there's no finger pointing. I think there should be a review of that again, though, by the select board, and come up with a modification to that agreement, because you haven't authorized us to hire somebody to replace the streetlights.
And we've told them straight out that, this is the money you have. Tell us what you can give us for that money, because it's not, there isn't more coming until we have a town meeting even, and even that will take a fight. So
I think that's the key date and break point to clarify with them, is to say that the work we hired them for, in my understanding, was to take us to town meeting. And then whatever decision is made at town meeting will guide what we do or don't do with them following town meeting.
Yeah, you signed on for much more than that, Andrew.
Yep.
Well, actually, what's in the contract is quite extensive, and that's why we had to rein them in and say, no, wait, time out. This is what we need, and so that they understand that now, I think. And I'm working with. I had just another email with them tonight, and so we will get that to where we have just. What we really need is
if we go to town meeting and the voters say we prefer just to work with Eversource,
that's still an option. Yep,
then,
and they know that. That's actually even in, that's even in the real term agreement. One of the things that it actually says is that, it still comes down to at one point that you just say, do you want to go with Eversource, or you do want to continue with us, and that, or with, with real term. And so that's actually in the contract as well. So there is an out on that. You don't have to go forward. The town can certainly vote to end it, but we just needed to make sure that they weren't trying to do everything for us before, which is kind of the way they were. And part of that came from the person we worked with originally was Nadira from Real Term, and she magically disappeared in December. So we don't know what was happening behind the scenes. We just know that, and she was much harder to work with and communicate with, because we would say things to her and think she's got it, and then she would start saying something else altogether. So she was definitely a harder one to work with. We're now back with her boss, and he's a lot more understanding, I think, at this point, because he actually can call the shots with it, whereas Nadira didn't have the power to make decisions much. She was just trying to be moving along with the whole thing. So anyway, I think we're in better shape at the moment.
Rick, did you have something there?
Yeah, I think John's point's well taken, that the contract is of concern, not of concern right now. I think, we're a little down the rabbit hole with them. We hired them for a specific job. If they come through and they do this interim agreement to give you guys information you need to help flesh out the program, and then they do a legitimate full, what we hired for in the first place, investment grade audit, and bring that to us and stay at the 9,100 or less, then at that point, we can now look at, all right, should we now be concerned about the contract and let it go because there's no more money or nothing else they can do until after town meeting? And should we take the precaution of terminating it or not and leave that discussion for down the road? So I'm comfortable leaving it alone for now.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a good route to go.
I agree with Rick. I think if we get to town meeting with an investment grade audit and we can lay it side by side with what Eversource is proposing, then we'll have what I think we said to the voters that we would do.
Right.
You know, I think the question that I have for you, Jeff, in terms of your order of operations and the 6 tasks you laid out, it sounds to me like the committee would like the select board to make decisions about the adding or subtracting of lights before we get to some of these other tasks, so we know what size of our light footprint we're working with. And I think what I shared with you in the email exchange we had before the meeting was just that I think that the streetlight committee should come back to this board when you're ready and walk through that sort of in buckets with, here are the really easy decisions of, you know, these are lights that actually don't exist that we can decommission. That's a fairly quick one. But if there are lights that, you know, might be next to other lights that some residents have requested be turned off, I think
They have a
that
hearing. Yeah,
that
I think
needs to
that
go through a decommissioning process, and we
Sure.
need to start that process going in order to make those kinds of decisions. So, you know,
Yeah.
so that's what I'm hoping your committee will bring back to us and kind of walk through
Yep.
this, because the report that you made was quite impressive and looked like a lot of work that you put in.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's a lot of different lights we're talking about, making decisions about. So, you know, I think we should really map that out sooner than later so that we can get to town meeting with the package that you want to present.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. So we also need to reach out to the residents along those lights where we're having suggestions too. And that brings up the question of how many of those residents do we need to contact? Because in some cases, there's only a few houses on a street and we're talking about taking that light out, or so we can talk to everyone, but I don't know, you know, if there's a number of streetlights, but you're only talking one streetlight being removed, does everyone on the block get contacted, or how do we do that? And I'm willing to reach out to all that and to figure out who gets it. I just need to know how far to go to do, you know, not
Terry,
overdo it.
do you have any guidance for Jeff about that?
I think it's great that you want to reach out to the people on the street, but if the board is considering shutting any off, it would be advertised as a public hearing. So residents would have a poll number or an exact location, and then they could attend the hearing and comment at that point too.
Okay, that's great. And I'm willing to do a workshop kind of ahead of that board meeting so that we don't have to discuss each light on your guys' time. We can do it, you know, I could do that as a public meeting somewhere downtown or whatever, and just walk people through the different lights and see who has what questions so that we can kind of head that off at the base. I think for the most part, people seem, I mean, almost everyone has talked about removing lights. Almost no one's talked to me about adding a light. So that's kind of good news from our end, because I'm the only one who's actually talked about adding a couple, and that was just ones that I found that I thought might be really our responsibility, but Eversource doesn't have them on the books for us. There's 3 lights like that, and Rick had pointed out there's 2 of them across from Posada on the main on Route 2, not the ones in Posada's parking lot. Those are actually paid for by Posada, but across the street from there, there's 2 fairly critical lights. Those are not on the Eversource list. They must have been added and never put on the books for Shelburne, so we've never been really paying for those lights, and no one, as far as I know, is even paying for them. So I think they're just kind of out there. So, but probably we should pick those up and decide whether we want to move forward. As long as there's going to be a business in there, I think those 2 lights are pretty important to have. If we didn't have a business there, they could probably be dimmed down or something because it would be less important. But anyway, so that's the kinds of details that we can get into if, when you're ready
Well,
to.
I would say if you're doing, I applaud you for doing that sort of workshop on it before we get to the public hearings, because I think it's easy for people to miss those legal notices that get posted, and then we would
Absolutely.
have a lot of discontent people if they said, well, I never heard about this or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, so I think that's great if you're willing to do
Okay.
some additional outreach.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, just keeping Greg in the loop so that we make sure that public safety perspective is covered there if we're turning lights off, you know,
Yeah.
is very important also. So
Yeah, I believe they have to be run through the police chief as well. When you do a hearing, I think the police chief has to be involved somehow.
oh, good. Okay.
So that's good. I mean, and actually, on a lot of these, real term can also tell us what's the legal ramification, because they know the rules, and we're not eliminating any lights at intersections where there's a road teeing into another road. We're keeping all those intact in this report, but there's still, it's an amazing number of lights that just seem like they were put up next to other things, and lights that are next to roads that are no longer there. And so they're now just lighting up someone's driveway. So there are a number of lights that I think people will actually be happy to see removed. And that's whether or not we go forward with Eversource or with our, you know, our own thing. We can still remove those lights, and that'll save us money down the road either way. So okay.
All right. Is that as far as you want to go this evening, or is there more?
Yeah, I think that's the main thing, unless Rick or anybody has other questions that you want to.
I'd just like to say that you've done a heck of a job so far. The map where you can click on the street light and have it pop up and tell you everything about it. The next piece that you put out just this last week with the color keyed, we're talking about taking these out and maybe activating the. You guys have done one heck of a job so far, and I think a lot of that falls to you. You're definitely the yeoman's work.
But we've got a really amazing team. Yep. Greg, who's just a volunteer on our team, yep, has gone to every single streetlight on his own and done a tremendous amount of work. He's even measured the lumens coming down in some cases and things. So we're trying to do the best we can do. And I think it's really helpful for me because I'm a very visual person. So I like having a visual map that tells me where each light is. And I think it'll help Terry down the road too, because you're going to have to, when people are calling you up now, you don't know really which pole they're even talking about unless you go look at the pole. And if you go look at the pole, about probably at least a third to half of the numbers are missing. So you can probably think that you're on one pole and you're actually on a different pole, because it took me a long time to figure out the numbering right and get it correct. So, but anyway, yeah, so it's been a learning curve, but
yeah. Well, you've done a great job, and I reviewed all of the recommendations, and I didn't see where I had any problem with any of them, and I could only see the one that we discussed on that dead end that might have some concern. We shouldn't mention it tonight and get people riled up. But yeah, no. You're taking an approach to go, knock on a couple doors or make some calls and find out, just get a gut feeling for how they would receive it. But I think you're right, moving forward on this sooner than later, as Andrew suggested, is definitely prudent on whichever way we go.
All right, great. And we were thinking of having a meeting too in April for talking about streetlights as well, for part of the dark skies. If there's a dark skies week somewhere, and I think it's the second week in April. So we may have another kind of workshop at that point, just to let people learn about dark skies and lighting in general. So we'll try and have some public things before we get sprung on them at the town meeting at the end. So. Okay.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Jeff. That was really informative, and thanks to your committee for all the work that you are all doing.
Thanks for giving me a really great committee.
All right.
Including John Walsh, who's on here. He gets to go on vacation.
Last words, Terry or John, from you?
I just want to echo what Rick said, that Jeff really has carried the yeoman work on this and is doing a phenomenal job.
Great. Well, thanks. Good. All right. Well, onward, and we'll look forward to your next step there.
Okay,
Um,
thanks.
So we are now on to old business A, which is the proposed solar array for the highway pole barn roof and the draft RFP. Who wants to start on that? Is it John?
Yeah, I can give you a quick update. So what I tried to do is, Terry was able to forward me a RFP that the town of Montague put together last year or the year before. So I imported it from a PDF file, and when I did that, any word that had a TI in it, like an active, came across as AVIE. There was no TI. So it took me multiple hours to go through the entire 36 pages and correct all those misspellings. I did try focusing on, I also did a search and replace for the town of Montague, their locations to the town of Shelburne. I obviously had some mistakes as far as names of roads and stuff. I thought it was the Shelburne Coleraine Road. It's just the opposite, Coleraine. So anyways, Terry picked up on those, and I think some of you have already looked at those corrections. I think things of that nature just need to, accept make the proposed change and accept it, as opposed to going through a total review, because that will just speed things up. I did try to take some time with the scope of work. The language may not be clear enough, and it may need to be actually reworded or wordsmithed so it's clear, especially with your concerns, Andrew, about doing the federal tax credit information. I thought I had put that in there, but it may not have jumped out. So it should have been in the first section in one of those earlier bullets, but it probably needs to be repeated back down in the scope of work. So I would suggest, and I think Terry and I speaking briefly about it, that it would be helpful just to sit down at a table and go through the entire document, reevaluating what we want to prioritize for the evaluation itself and how to score the reports, and try to do that as quickly as possible. My concern is if Vipassana goes in, and I don't know how big that they're talking about, but they potentially could eat up the entire allocation that's left for the town of Shelburne.
Thank you, John. Yes, I did review the draft that you put together, and thanks for going through all the corrections on that and getting it to where it is now. There is some fairly general language in the initial scope, which has the 8 points in it, about having the proponents or the bidders come up with the most financially advantageous approach, which I think is good, and technically it would include the tax credits, but because the tax credit is kind of a new thing that requires a separate application at the end of the project, I think we should specify that and even call it out as kind of an ad alternate, so that if there are bidders that we might want to consider because they have favorable pricing but don't want to take that piece on, that we would structure the RFP so that we could consider those prices and those bids. The points I made to you in my reply, I'm just repeating here for other people, just to say, I don't think we should advertise how much money we have available for this project in the RFP, because that actually makes it an RFQ more than an RFP, where people aren't really competing on price, they're just competing on qualifications. And I'd rather see a really competitive price bid put out there. So I would leave what we have available out of the document. The third thing is that I think we need to come to clarity before we issue the RFP, whether we have an engineering stamp already in what Dave Reland did for the pole barn or not. And whether we want to get something from him before we go out to bid that will show that we've evaluated our new building. Because in looking at Montague's boilerplate, there was a very large section in there, 4.6, I think, about requesting an engineering study. And it's not clear to me that we need an engineering study on a new building. So we just need to figure out whether we have already what we need from engineers, or if we want to ask in the bid for the bidders to essentially provide us with an engineering stamp for the new structure that we've put up.
I completely agree, Andrew, and that's why I think we all need to just sit down and hammer this out and what to delete and what to add.
Yeah.
I think we should schedule that as soon as you get back from vacation.
And Terry, do we have somebody to work with on the FERCog end of things?
I'm not sure that person has been identified yet, but we have a signed contract with them, or a professional service agreement. So I would invite them to the table when we have a meeting scheduled.
Oh, so you're confident that somebody will come to the table if we schedule a meeting then?
Yes.
Okay, okay, I just didn't know if there's anybody there at the other end, if Andrea Wood's no longer there.
I did speak with a woman by the name of Elizabeth, and I forget her last name. And she sent me some information. The new procurement agent is just onboarding, so she was not sure what her capabilities were, but it will be a discussion with Bob Dean to make sure that there is we do have the signed contract, as Terry mentioned. So we just need to make sure that they're aware that we're moving forward with it.
Okay,
I believe she was going to inform him of. I did
okay,
tell Elizabeth that I would be willing to be the primary editor. They had a previous version that had a lot of highlighted areas that needed filling in. And I'm not sure that they're comfortable with the format that Montague used. So that would be important to make sure that the format that we're putting together is compatible with how they're used to proceeding on RFPs.
okay.
I thought COG was involved in that Montague's was through COG. Maybe I'm wrong.
I didn't notice that in the version that I edited, but that could.
Yeah, I don't believe so.
Okay.
Oh, Terry, you think they hired a solar consultant?
No, I think it might have been done in-house. I'm not 100% sure.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I thought it might be helpful to have some more specific language about the financially optimal system that we're trying to get the bidders to each propose. And more specific language about the tax credit application. And one suggestion I had about that, for which I do not have a conflict of interest, and I wanted to run by you, John, is whether we might get advice from somebody like Ben Weil at UMass, who is their, building, what is it called? Their building extension program professor there. He's done a bunch of studies and projects on municipal buildings and renewable energy and things like that.
It doesn't hurt, but I don't think he's going to bring much to the table as far as, we know the roof can't handle up to 27 or 28 kW. We're limited with the amount of southern exposure by, one square meter gives us 1 kWA or 1 kW. So from that perspective,
That's not the part I'm concerned about.
Right. I don't
I'm
know.
concerned about getting the language right on what schedule we're in with the net metering credits and what, and how to describe the tax credit application process and all that kind of stuff. If you feel like we can do that ourselves, that's great. If we need help, that's where I'm just casting about to say who can help us with that stuff.
Yeah, I think Ben would be an appropriate person to try to talk to.
Mhm.
I don't necessarily think I have the time to do all that, so somebody else would have to step forward to make those efforts.
Okay. And Terry, do you feel like you have a handle on the engineering stamp question? Like where we left things with Dave Vreeland and stuff?
Dave Reland gave us a price for both the stamp and construction oversight. I did reach out to Mark and ask if he had obtained the stamp on the drawing or the letter to accompany the plans, and he has not responded. So I can follow up with him tomorrow. But
I
I do
mean-
think it's important, Dave's already gone through all the plans. And I think it was a total of $400 for both, maybe 400 for the stamp and 400 for oversight. I'm not sure, but he invested the time to review the plans and verify that the building could withstand the weight of the solar.
So where we stand with that is we just have to agree to pay him to put his stamp on it, and then we can go out to bid, notifying the bidders that we have crossed that T. Is that correct?
I would
think so,
say
yeah.
yes.
And I would agree.
Okay, because that seems like a very low cost way to get past 4.6 there and not, include all that language about the engineering study.
Yeah, and again, a lot of that was put in, remain for discussion for further editing, so
Right.
that's fine.
Okay. So if we can, Terry, if we can bring that to our next meeting, we can get that done and have that behind us in terms of going forward with FERCog.
Can't we have
Okay.
that in a working meeting as opposed to in the middle of one of our regular meetings? Because it's what, 30 some odd pages?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, why, we don't need to do that at a regular meeting. I would think we could do a regular working meeting with Terry, John, and.
I was only talking, Rick, about bringing a motion to the table to pay to pay Dave the $800 to put his stamp on stuff.
I thought, okay, that hasn't been approved.
I don't think so. Have we approved that, Terry?
I don't believe there was ever a formal vote to do that.
And it wasn't part of the project itself. It was an add-on later by us.
Well, we've carved out a couple of things now that we're going to do before we go out to bid. One is that, and the other is having Mark go forward and install the three-phase service and
We
the meter
authorized
and the
that.
meter to the, which we did already make a motion for. So those are things that we're now doing prior to going out to bid, so that we have those ducks in a row. That's all I was suggesting, was that we make that motion and, authorize Dave to proceed with that.
If that's required, I would make that motion to approve that $400 figure to get our stamp, whatever the process takes. Apparently it's been broached already, so I would move that we approve having Mark pursue getting the engineering stamp from that vendor.
And Terry, is that 400 or 800? I thought there were two parts to it.
One, I don't have the file with me. I believe it was $400 for the stamp and an additional $400 for construction oversight. But I would want to verify that second cost before I set it with 100% certainty.
Okay, so what should we say in our motion? Do we want to make a
I would
motion tonight or
say-
just wait?
I would say up to $400 for the stamp, and I believe that's the accurate cost of that.
Okay, so Rick has made that motion, which I will second. And is there further discussion? Well, hearing none, we'll vote. Rick?
Aye.
Andrew is aye, and we have approved a motion for Dave Vreeland to go forward with his engineering stamp on the pole barn building plans for their solar capacity. Great. Terry, do you want to be in touch with FERCog and John around timing for scheduling this meeting?
Yes.
Great. Do we have anything more on the RFP?
Nope.
Tom Johnson, I see your hand. What do you got?
Just a very minor comment. John, I believe you were concerned about whether or not there will be the capacity to put as many kilowatts on the pole barn, given the fact that there are a lot of solar panels being put up at the Tibetan retreat or whatever it is.
The Vipassana Meditation Center.
Thank you. Thank you. That is on a different substation. The
Okay.
meditation center is on Shelburne, and this pole barn site is on the Cumberland. So there's no problem at all.
Great.
The Coleraine, I think you meant to say.
No, it is a Shelburne substation. On the Eversource map, it's called the Shelburne substation.
Right. No, the second thing you said was Cumberland. I'm not
Yes,
sure.
I did, and that's on the map.
That's a
What-
name of a substation, Andrew.
I thought you were talking about the Shelburne Coleraine Road or something. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
A minor point, but no problem with regard to the pole barn location for capacity.
That
Great.
takes the heat off a little bit too. Thank you for that.
Good. So if there's no further on the RFP, we will move along to new business. And we have the Mohawk Athletic Association, and thank you, John, for all your work on that.
Absolutely.
And we'll look forward to cleaning it up and getting it going when you return. Enjoy your
Thank you.
travels.
And I'm off to the airport right now. So
All righty.
Safe travels.
see you in 12 days.
Great.
Good
All
night.
right.
Well, we're actually gonna have a meeting down in Costa Rica, I think, John, so we'll meet you there. Don't worry, we'll keep it going.
Safe travels, John.
I'll have the taxi pick you up at the airport.
All right, so it looks like our item of new business is Mohawk Athletic Association requesting an Iron Bridge dinner request, which I'm assuming they have, and that's for July 28th, 2024 for their bridge dinner. I'm assuming they have approached DOT about being on the bridge itself, and they are asking us for the portion of Bridge Street that they're using. Is that correct, Terry?
It's a multi-part process. First, select boards from each town approve the event, the police chief approves it, and then Mass DOT has an application process for use of their bridge.
Oh, okay. But technically, we're approving the part of their project that extends into the town of Shelburne, right?
Yes, what will happen next if the select board approves this request is that I will send a letter to Mass DOT under your signature saying that you're supporting the event and the bridge closure, and that will go in hand with an application on behalf of Mohawk Athletic Association.
Great. Rick, anything on your end?
Nope, I think it's a great thing every year, and I would move that we approve this application.
All right, I will second that. Is there any discussion? I guess I'll only note with regret that I will probably be out of town on that particular date, but so I've just arranged some of my vacation plans.
Wow.
But to be up in Maine. So sorry to miss it, but if there's no other discussion, we'll call to a vote. All those in favor, Rick?
Aye.
Andrew is aye, and the motion carries. Is there any other business? Nothing from you, Terry. Our next meeting is January 29th. Is that gets us back on our regular schedule? Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. And do we have any correspondence? I don't see any. Do we have any public comment? Seeing none, we'll call for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved and seconded. And all in favor, Rick?
Aye.
Andrew is aye, and we are adjourned.
Great job,
Thank-
Andrew. Can tell
thank
you've
you.
done it before.